The Canadian supply truck was not meant to stop. It was late winter somewhere deep in Europe, and the world ahead of them looked swallowed by white silence. Snow smothered the trees, the open fields, even the crooked fence posts that once marked villages now abandoned by war. The men had been driving for hours, focused on reaching their assigned checkpoint before darkness sealed the roads in ice. Inside the cab, the heater droned softly. No one talked much. Then the driver eased his foot off the accelerator. "Did you hear that?" he asked under his breath. At first it seemed like the wind threading to the forest. Thin, uneven, easy to dismiss. But it came again, higher this time, fragile and strained. It was not the wind. It was crying. The truck rolled to a halt. Doors opened into the cutting air, boots pressing into snow hardened like stone. The sound drifted faintly across the field, more than one voice, weak and desperate. The men followed it toward a shallow ditch near the tree line. There, half buried under snow and stiffened blankets, something moved. A small hand emerged, then another. 10 children lay pressed together beneath layers of frozen cloth, barely visible against the white ground. Their faces were drained of color, lips tinged blue, eyes wide with fear and exhaustion. The oldest could not have been more than 12. The smallest looked no older than 4. They were not soldiers. They were not part of any strategy. They were simply children trying not to freeze. One of the Canadians dropped to his knees, sweeping snow aside with trembling hands. "They're alive," he said, his voice tight. But not for long. There was no debate. Coats were stripped off shoulders and wrapped around small bodies. Blankets were unfolded and layered over thin frames. One man sprinted back to the truck for hot water. Another lifted a child whose cries had nearly faded into silence. The road ahead could wait. The orders in their pockets could wait. At that moment, 10 fragile lives depended entirely on what they chose to do, and none of them were about to climb back into the cab and drive on. Inside the truck it felt warmer, but not nearly warm enough. They packed the children in close, covering them with every spare layer they owned. Gloves rubbed tiny hands, trying to coax feeling back into stiff fingers. A cup of warm water was held carefully to trembling lips, given slowly so it would not overwhelm them. The children barely spoke. One whispered something in German. Another only stared, eyes unfocused, fighting to pull asleep. The smallest boy had stopped crying altogether, his head resting against a soldier's chest. That silence frightened them most. "Keep him awake," someone murmured. "Talk to him. Don't let him drift." And with that, a decision was made without ceremony. The truck turned away from its assigned route and pushed toward the nearest field medical station. The road grew rougher as they drove. Snow deepened. Visibility shrank by the minute. If they became stuck, there might be no second chance. No one voiced that fear. In the back, one soldier held 2 children against him the entire journey, speaking softly in a language they likely did not understand. It did not matter. The tone was steady, reassuring, human. Gradually, faint color crept back into pale cheeks. A cough broke the silence. A small shiver. Then a weak cry. Proof of life. When at last the truck pulled into the medical outpost, medics rushed outside, startled by what they found. 10 children, frozen, exhausted, but still breathing. They were carried inside quickly, boots echoing against the wooden floor. As one of the older boys was lifted from the truck, he reached out and caught the sleeve of the soldier who had held him through the storm. He said nothing. He did not need to. His grip spoke clearly enough. Outside, snow continued to fall, slowly covering the tire tracks as if the moment itself were being erased. But for those 10 children, nothing would ever be the same. Warmth returned inch by inch inside the small station. Clean blankets replaced frozen rags. Damp clothing steamed near the stove. Medics worked in calm concentration, checking pulses, listening to lungs, sharing quiet glances. Finally, one nodded. "They'll make it." The Canadian crew did not celebrate. They did not smile. They simply exhaled, as though they had been holding that breath since the first faint cry reached their ears on the road. As the children regained strength, their voices came back in fragments. They had been traveling with adults days earlier, moving from village to village as the front line shifted. Somewhere in the chaos, they were separated, Night fell quickly. The cold fell faster. They hid where they could and waited, not expecting anyone to hear them, not expecting anyone to stop. One soldier left his gloves on a nearby chair before stepping away. Another placed a chocolate bar beside a small hand and pretended it was nothing at all. The smallest boy slept for hours, his breathing steady at last. By morning, color had fully returned to their faces. Orders arrived soon after. The truck was required elsewhere. The war did not pause for quiet mercies. Before departing, the crew stood for a final moment beside the beds. The children watched in silence. No tears now. The oldest boy rose to his feet, squared his shoulders, and gave an awkward, solemn nod, as though determined to appear braver than he felt. Years later, there would be no official report praising a detour. No medal would mention the change in route. No photograph would capture the weight of that choice. But 10 children survived because, on a silent road, someone decided to listen. The truck disappeared before the sun had fully climbed the horizon. Snow drifted down once more, smoothing away the tracks until the road looked untouched, ordinary, forgettable. Inside the medical station, however, life moved forward. The children ate warm meals for the first time in days. Their voices strengthened. Careful laughter returned, delicate at first, like something fragile relearned. Arrangements would be made to transfer them, to reunite them with any family who could be found, to shelter them until the war finally loosened its hold. The Canadian crew never spoke of that night as anything remarkable. They did not write about a home. They did not recount it in crowded rooms years later. To them, it was not a heroic act. It was simply the moment they chose not to drive past. History would go on to record battles, troop movements, victories, and defeats. It would not record the faint sound of crying beneath falling snow, nor the quiet decision that followed. Yet 10 children grew up because of it. Time moved forward. The war ended. Borders shifted. Cities rebuilt from rubble. New roads replaced old frozen paths. Every winter, snow still fell as it always had. Most people never knew what had happened on that quiet stretch of road. But 10 children carried fragments of memory into adulthood. The biting cold, the darkness, the rumble of an engine breaking through the storm. Some remembered a steady voice when everything else felt lost. Strong arms, warm blankets. The moment the night did not win. They grew into ordinary lives. Families worked, children of their own. While far away, the men who had stopped their truck returned home with memory they never called heroism. To them, it had simply been the right thing to do. History tends to celebrate what is loud and visible, but sometimes the most important moments unfold in silence. A cry carried through the snow, a driver who slowed instead of accelerating, a choice to care when no one was watching, and sometimes that is enough.